Hillary has been lengthening her excuses as to why she lost the election. She didn't really lose the election. It was stolen from her by, I think it's up to 24 different excuses she has now. Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia. And as I said, my grandfather was a Macedonian content farmer, and we often think about, gathering on the porch and recalling the old days on the Macedonian he never thought that the old content farmers he left behind in Macedonia would one day steal the U.S. presidential election. They are gnarled, hard-working Macedonian peasants, and the way they were able to reach out and steal the election from a well-oiled machine
welcome
headed
to the
by
Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. My name is Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin and Jason coming in from Skopje, Macedonia.
All right, and today we are recording on the last day of March of 2019, a day that has never been before and never will be again, March 31, 2019. Tomorrow is April the 1st. April Fool's Day, yes. Now in Macedonia, of course, children dress up.
Yeah, it's like a big carnival thing.
Right, yeah. And over, and I know you lived here for a couple of years, and April Fools is people play practical jokes on each other. I have no idea what the history of that is or not. Now, one thing that's not a practical joke is that tomorrow, Monday, April 1, the presidential race in Macedonia officially kicks off.
Yep.
And we have three candidates. So we got three candidates. The race kicks off tomorrow officially. The first round is on April 21, which in the Protestant Catholic world is actually Easter. Mm-hmm. And then the second round is May 5. And in between, in the Orthodox world, we have Easter. So a lot going on in the next month and a week between the elections and Easter and all kinds of things. But we got three candidates.
Yeah, in reality, there are two candidates and one who is trying to beef up the odds for the two small ethnic Albanian opposition parties, they see a good opening here. The DUI will send their votes, their Albanian votes, towards Stevo Pendarovski, so they will not register as an independent party. So basically, the two smaller parties, the political Islam Erdoganist style Besa party and the more nationalist Zijedin Selas party, the more nationalist Alliance of Albanians party. They will be the only two Albanian parties which will register independently on the 21st of April, in the evening on April 21st. So basically, they just want to say, well, we have 50, 60, 70,000 Albanian voters behind us, and DUI's got nothing.
Right. So, what's going to happen?
It's really difficult to tell, honestly. It's the few polls which have been out, and even some of the very praised DSM media outlets like Deutsche Welle, they have published them at face value, even though they come from Vimera. DSM have not shown a proper poll. They tell us that Sidanovska is in the lead, which essentially, we are assuming that the Albanian votes of DUI are baked into Pendarovski's result. While Sidanovska, she still has room to grow if after the first round these two smaller Albanian parties have their contingent of votes and they try to shop it around. They try to offer it to Pendarovski or Sidanovska. They already hate DUI, so they wouldn't want to mix their votes with DUI, but they also have been riling up their electorate against Vimera as well. So they will play hard to get. They might try to then switch their voters toward Pendarovski, but then they would have to mix together with DUI, a party they accuse of being extremely corrupt ahead of their voters. They might try to divert their voters toward Vimera, toward Sidanovska, but again, they've been bad-mouthing Vimera for so long in the Albanian camp, so both options would be difficult. But this is the one big vote potential for the second round, which will, the voters who will vote for Blerim Reka in the first round, and then they will have to choose between Pendarovski and Sidanovska. Other than that, another thing which could influence the second vote, if there is a wipeout, an unexpectedly good result for either of the candidates. The polls now show Sidanovsky in a slight lead, but if she wins strongly against Pendarovsky, she might carry this momentum into the second round. If she loses, and the way she would lose would probably be with vote rigging, like the kind which happened during the referendum in September 2018. Then, with this, and obviously taking into account all the systematic daily arrests of opposition officials in the country from both VMRO and from the smaller parties like Grom, Stevche Akimovsky's party, and the Socialist Party, the Zingo Party, who both support Silyanovska. I mean, the opposition is fully in the rights to declare a boycott of the second round of elections. If there is, on top of these irregularities in the pre-election, pre-campaign period, if there are also irregularities on the day of the elections, I mean, it's long past time for them to declare that this is not a democracy and that elections are, not the way to bring down the Zaev government. Losing the first round of elections with significant irregularities should definitely lead to a boycott of the second round.
Right. Now, if there is, I think it's worth pointing out that if there were to be an effective boycott, and that would mean that there has to be 40% of the 1.8 million must come out and vote. If it's below, then the elections are null and void, and new elections have to be organized. But I think it's worth mentioning that if that were to be the case, in that period while you're waiting to set up new elections, let's just say it's 6 months, that means that the so-called Speaker of Parliament, Talat Jafari, who was illegally installed, then becomes acting president for 6 months, which I still say is a very bad thing for Macedonia. This is a man who, when he was a member of the Macedonian Armed Forces in 2001, defected, left his position as a defender of Macedonia, joined the so-called NLA of Ali Ahmeti, the so-called National Liberation Army, and fought against Macedonia. Then went on, of course, to become defense minister, so-called speaker. Then he would become de facto president. I mean, all of that is a tragedy of what is it? A mockery of a sham of a tragedy of justice, or something like that, like Woody Allen says, except this is real. So, but going back to let's just say that there are elections do go forward, and we know there's going to be some cheating from SDSM because that's what they are, and Dewey, of course. But what the scenario you just laid out, it just seems it's very difficult, I think, to tell, and maybe it's just too early, even though we've only got a short window of 3 weeks before the first round of elections. But if Silyanovska does win, or either strongly or in general, just on May 5, I think that sends a very public rebuke to Zoran Zaev, to his government, and to the Western elites that demanded Macedonia change its name and identity. And so that's what I'm hoping, is that she does win, and that public rebuke is loud and clear against and towards Zoran Zaev and the Western elites. This is really the first measure of gauge of support for Zaev and his government post-Prespa agreement. Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, definitely. They've already given up on their normal electoral base, which is ethnic Macedonians, and then leaving the ethnic Albanian voters for Dewey and the other more conservative Albanian parties to divide between themselves. SDSM their candidate is losing in the polls. They obviously lost the 2016 elections. They're now losing in the polls after absorbing
2014.
2016
parliamentary, right? Yeah, but it's also worth pointing out, I think, Stevo Pendarovsky, who is the candidate of Citizen and Dewey, ran in 2014 and lost, and he's actually pretty much a hated figure amongst many Macedonians.
Yeah, he's not. His main base of support is in the urban centers of Skopje and on Twitter, and basically, Twitter is a great vehicle for sharing information, but absolutely, useless for motivating voters. It's, the numbers there are ridiculously low. It all comes down to the proper party infrastructure on the ground.
True. Yeah.
And Stevo is a person of the social media, a creature of social media. He lost the 2014 elections um, solidly. And it's important to note that then Ivanov actually won a solid share of the more conservative Albanian vote, while Dewey supported Pendarovsky once already, although not publicly, but it was very clear that they're supporting him. And still Ivanov won a solid share of the Albanian vote, and of course the presidency. So everything points, in the proper direction for Sidanovska, except obviously the big difference from then until now is this massive systematic oppression of the opposition, the massive arrests, the decimation of the main opposition party with, everybody and anybody being arrested and put in prison on ridiculous charges. Essentially the coup which we suffered. But then on the other hand, another change is, this unimaginable humiliation of the name change, which Zaev and Pendarovsky and Dewey delivered, brought onto the country. So he actually stands to lose even more votes than, by a even bigger margin than he lost in 2016.
Right. It would be interesting to talk to our friends, the Western elites, the Western embassies there in Macedonia and others, and ask them if they think, just in generally speaking now, if it would be good for Macedonia, if it's good for any parliamentary republic, for a democracy, for one party, or in this case, one party and one junior party, basically, to control the government, parliament, president, and local elections. Just on the face of it, it's obvious that's not healthy for democracy to have one party controlling everything, and yet that's what could happen in this situation. And I'd be curious to know if the EU ambassador and others, think that's a good thing.
When Vomero had this level of support in the public and this level of this concentration of power, you couldn't hear the end of it from the US ambassador and from the EU embassy, at least in private settings. I'm not sure publicly, but through their media outlets they found that they definitely sent out this message insistently. Now, no way. There is not a chance to hear anything like this from them now.
Yeah. Well, let's pivot a little bit from this all this talk about the elections and what's going on. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know who's going to be elected. We can only guess. Next week we'll have a little bit more of a better idea. And this is something, Cvetin, I just kind of noticed in looking at social media and whatnot. I saw a couple of things on Twitter, Facebook, and some of the websites that I follow just in this past week. It just seems like there seems to be a resurgence, if we can call it that, of Macedonian culture, which is something that is good. And the first thing I want to look at is this band called Nesto, which was formed in 2008. It's two brothers. And they released a video and song just last Monday. I believe let's see, what's the title of the song?
Pitam, Babo.
Thank you, yes. And in English, what does that mean?
I will ask you something, grandmother. This is basically what the Ottoman officer who is he's investigating an elderly lady. He's questioning her because she was reported that she has been harboring Vomero fighters. And he asks her, I will ask you a question, tell me true, don't lie to me. Who was last night in your house having dinner? We heard there were Vomero fighters there. And she responds, was it Goca Delchev? Was it Dame Gruev? The two famous fighters.
Yeah, the whole song is infused with history, and it goes back to basically the turn of the century, last century, not this century, and focuses strongly on Macedonia's freedom fighters who were fighting for the independence of Macedonia. It's a beautiful song. The video is very well done. It's very very professional. And just in 1 week, it already has over 660,000 views on YouTube.
I haven't checked, but yeah, it was 400 last time I checked. But
oh my gosh, it was incredible because I saw it on Monday afternoon, I think, of this past week, and it was at 115 or something like that. And then the very next morning, it was 250,000, and it just keeps going up. And because it's well done, because it's beautiful, because it speaks to Macedonia's history and culture. And this is I've never seen anything like this with a particular Macedonian song. Maybe it's happened in the past or not. I don't know. But I do tend to think, and, I value your opinion, that perhaps, with all of that has been forced on Macedonia over the past couple of years with the current government, that's an action, and this is the reaction. And people are saying, wait a second, no, you're gonna try and change our name and our identity and our history and our heritage and our culture and our language. No, we're gonna fight back, and we're gonna fight back by lifting up our history and our heritage and our culture and our music and our language and literature and just everything else that makes Macedonia unique. At least that's the way I see it. I don't know what your take is.
Yeah, the 2008 Greek veto for Macedonian NATO membership produced essentially an outburst of anger, and the response on the part of Macedonia was the Alexander the Great statue in Skopje, all the other forms of celebration of all layers of our history, not just the ones approved by the Greeks and Bulgarians and whoever, but all of them comprehensively understood. And the 2008 veto was nothing compared to what is happening now. So obviously the response is going to be far worse, far greater. We're still not sure what shape and form it will take, but this is definitely one of them. And if you've noticed, if you've looked at the video, it's not only a response to the name change, but this is actually an Ottoman officer questioning an elderly lady who is defiantly telling him, she's not trying to wiggle out of the situation. She tells him, I will tell you truthfully, it was not Gotza Delchev, it was not Dame Gruev, it was Todor Alexandrov with his men. And they had dinner, and in the morning they rode off on Mount Pirin in Bulgaria, the iconic Mount Pirin, to raise the flag of Macedonia, which was, their flag was red and black, and the inscription on it said, death or liberty for Macedonia. So she is absolutely defiant in the song. But if you saw the video, the styling of the questioning, it begins with an elderly lady, but then it switches to a young woman, obviously the representation of Macedonia, who is being questioned. But the two people who are questioning her, they look nothing like Ottoman officers. In fact, they look very much like communist-era UDBA communist secret police officers. Now, this is a direct response to this campaign of arrest and persecution of VMRO people now, in the special prosecutor cases, in the parliament incident cases. They're even arresting, from Nikola Gruevski on top down to the urban street kids from VMRO in the area of Skopje where I live, who are just painting graffiti against Zaev on the streets, and they're being arrested for this. People are being arrested for Facebook comments, which are, critical of Zaev, and they're immediately declared hate speech, assassination in the making cases, and they have police barging into their homes. So Zaev is ruling by very serious repression here, and this is what the song represents. This does not speak about the Ottoman slavery. This speaks about the current moment right now.
Yeah, well, two things. I want to ask you a question, and then I want to pivot yet to another thing. And that is the question is: has the government responded in any way to this song, this video?
They had the usual suspects, the Colored Revolution Twitter commentators and protesters who were presenting to be these independent voices of reason and rebellion, etc. And most of them now work for the government. There are about 80 people working in the PR sector of the government, brought by Zoran Zaev there. These are all these Twitter people, these USAID-funded, EU embassy-funded commentators working for several PR agencies like New Moment here, who are basically now intertwined with the government. And, they would their response was this is not fashionable to listen to these kind of songs. They're now posting pictures they're organizing rooftop parties in one of the decrepit student, these large student campuses here in Skopje. So now we're the urban people listening to techno, while, these VMRO people, the great unwashed, they're listening to these kind of songs about grandmothers. So they were mocking, the song. But it's such a strong song, it's very difficult to mock it. And then the other response, which was even more ridiculous, So, for example, we had Damian Manchevsky. He's the Minister for Public Administration. He's shaping up to be one of the more hardcore communists in the party, in the government, like ideologically and culturally. And I think he's like a nephew of Vlado Malevsky, the guy who wrote the lyrics to the anthem of Macedonia. And the song about Todor Alexandrov, it was only one of the several songs which the communists banned. They wanted to ban the Alexandrov song because he was a very anti-communist, anti-lefty guerrilla freedom fighter. He was taking it very strongly to the Turks, to the Serbian occupiers. He would often work with the Bulgarians, but he would, without any doubt, work to be his own person. If anything, he wanted to control Bulgaria as well. Out of the question for him was to subvert Macedonia to Bulgaria. In fact, he wanted to rule Bulgaria, but he would dish it out very strongly against the leftists. So he would be banned. The actual anthem of Macedonia, Izgre Zorana Slobodata, it would also be banned, and it was replaced by another song, the current anthem, Nesto Macedonia Seradja, which was written by this ancestor of Damian Manchevsky, the minister in the government. So Manchevsky comes out and he says, well, these Vemera people, they opposed our idea to write, our treaty we signed with Bulgaria, but they now honor Todor Alexandrov, who, he's implying that Alexandrov was a Bulgarian. So can you imagine this, what kind of mess is in the heads of the SDSM people? They keep, they insist on this old canard that Vemera people, that the opposition to the left, the opposition to Yugoslavia, to the socialism in Yugoslav times, it's all motivated by Bulgaria, that Vemera is pro-Bulgarian. This is their usual canard, their usual slur against Vemera. But at the same time, they're the ones signing this treaty in which they approach Bulgaria from a very subservient position, unlike what Alexandrov wanted, what Vemera wanted, an independent Macedonia, which will be a factor of its own in the region, what Gruevski wanted, having its own influence over Bulgaria, not vice versa. SDSM signed...
Which is what most Macedonians want.
Of course.
Today.
Yeah. And they're capitulating on all points, but then they still are not relinquishing this old... This is all they know. This is what they've been taught. They're trying to still look pretty and self-important from this situation. It's very difficult for somebody like Manchevsky to reconcile in his mind the fact that he is the one giving up Macedonian history to Bulgaria, allowing Bulgaria to write their history books, but at the same time, reconcile this with everything that he has been taught, and he has been telling himself that the left has fought Bulgarian fascism, that they liberated Macedonia from Bulgarians, and Bulgaria, that everybody opposed to their definitely pro-Serbian, socialist, Yugoslav, centrist, anti-sovereignist option in Macedonia, that everybody opposed to what they were offering is pro-Bulgarian. And now they signed this treaty with Bulgaria. They are having extremely hard time explaining it to themselves, but still their go-to attack against anybody on the right from them is, well, you're with the Bulgarians.
Right. Well, that's a good pivot to the next kind of subject, and that is we're talking about communists. We're talking about Bulgaria. I think it's worth mentioning for our listeners that may not know that the party of Zoran Zaev, Citizen, is the immediate successor party to the Communist League of Macedonia pre-1991. Maybe they've shed their Leninism, their Marxism, their Maoism, but at their core, they're still, far leftists. And speaking of far leftists, so Lenin said, "Give me just one generation of youth, and I'll transform the whole world." To paraphrase Lenin, Zoran Zaev and his government are saying, "Give me just one generation of children, and I'll transform North Macedonia." And that is exactly what he means. And you just alluded to this treaty that the government of Zoran Zaev signed with Bulgaria, the so-called Good Neighborly Relations Treaty, and of course the so-called Prespa agreement with Greece. Both of those agreements establish educational commissions. So Macedonia already has established, I should say, a commission with Bulgaria, and then a separate commission with Greece. And both Greece and Bulgaria, and we have heard from leading politicians in both of those countries that as regard these educational commissions, they're going to be very insistent that Macedonia basically do what Greece and then separately what Bulgaria want in terms of the children's history books, textbooks, school teaching guides, maps, atlases, etc. Otherwise, Greece and separately Bulgaria will veto Macedonia's EU membership. The various accession, there's 35 chapters that have to be opened and then closed in the EU accession process. So again, what's going on here is that Zoran Zaev has handed over effectively he has handed over the educational curriculum of Macedonia to Greece and to Bulgaria and said, you guys go ahead and tell us what we need to do. I think you used the word subservient there a moment ago. That's exactly what it is. It's interesting to see that Greece has made, and this is, let's be fair, okay, Cvetin? Greece has made one concession. They will change some of their school books with regard to Macedonia. So they'll no longer call it the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. They're going to change their school books and they're going to call it North Macedonia. It's just, and this is what happened. So you've got, and I think there was an article sometime this past week where Zoran Zaev said that as soon as this coming fall, so the new school year that begins in September, this educational curriculum that is being changed right now will be introduced into schools. And you start, look, this, we all know this. Children are very malleable. Yeah. They're easily shaped. They're shaped by, first and foremost, their parents at home and their grandparents and aunts and uncles and older brothers and sisters and whatnot. But then the education, that's what teachers do. They shape their minds. They shape their outlook on life and everything else. And that's what Greece and Bulgaria aim to do with these two treaties. And Zoran Zaev has said, go ahead, change our children's attitudes and minds and views of what Macedonia was, is, and should be.
Yeah, it's an extremely totalitarian approach which they're taking. They've tried this in Yugoslavia. I mean, I vividly remember when I was in elementary school, when our teacher was, she would ask us to declare our ethnic identity. And the few kids which would say Yugoslav instead of Macedonian, or they could have been Serb or whatever, we would have usually largely Macedonian and a few Serbs in the school, children of officers, etc. And everybody would say Macedonian, a few would say Serb, and then a few kids would say Yugoslav, people like Damian Manchevski, I'm sure he declared this Yugoslav in school, and the teacher would congratulate them.
Yeah.
But these were like a minuscule number. I think the census in Yugoslavia would be like 5% Yugoslav, and everybody else was, sticking it to the totalitarian Yugoslav state, and everybody would declare Croat, Serbian, Bosnian, etc.
Right.
This is going to backfire. There is no way this is going to be accepted by the people, especially as Zaev is not delivering economically, is not delivering, on his anti-corruption platform. His government is ridiculously corrupt. So they are, he was going against Dewey, calling them corrupt. Now he's begging them for votes to save his with Pendarovsky. So
no honor among thieves.
Absolutely, this is it's going to backfire, and we're going to have a response in Macedonia as we were going to have one in Greece. Just today, I see Mitsotakis was again coming out and saying that Greece will block Macedonia from opening EU accession talks, which makes sense. Tsipras is narrowing down on the polls, which always happens before elections. He's coming closer to Mitsotakis. So obviously Mitsotakis there's going to be a backlash both in Macedonia and in Greece to all this.
So what you're saying, if I understand you correctly, so reconciliation, peace, sweetness, and light eternal and friendship is not breaking out between Macedonia and Greece and Macedonia and Bulgaria? I'm shocked, I tell you.
Please.
Oh, come on. Well, all right. So moving on. Why don't we take a quick break? Let's play some of that the next time from their latest song, and then come back and talk about our farmers picks. And welcome back to the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. Cvetin and Jason, recording on March 31, Sunday. This is episode 20. I forgot to mention that. Tomorrow's April 1, when this will probably come out. We are back with our farmers picks. Cvetin, what do you got?
I'm going to go with a classic of the regional diplomacy and politics, a book by Greek journalist Takis Michas. It's called Unholy Alliance. And in it he publishes...
Oh, I've heard. Yeah.
He reveals how Greece and Serbia were coordinating their foreign policy in some of the worst periods of Serbian aggression toward Croatia, toward Bosnia, toward preparations for war with Kosovo. And the book reveals how Andonis Samaras, the man who created the name issue between Greece and Macedonia as foreign minister in the Mitsotakis government in the early 90s, was meeting with Milosevic and how they were discussing joint policy on Macedonia. This is one of the, this issue was at the core of the Greek issue with the Macedonian name. The book reveals how Serbia was proposing to Greece that Macedonia is partitioned, that Greece is rid of this potentially troublesome new neighboring country to its north, which Greece somewhat absurdly, somewhat maybe rationally feared could lead to a renewal of Macedonian consciousness in Greek-occupied Aegean Macedonia. So basically Greece wanted Macedonia done away with, and Serbia knew exactly what it wanted out of this. It reluctantly allowed Macedonia to declare independence, with a caveat that Macedonia could rejoin other Yugoslav republics in a future alliance. This is precisely what Serbia had in mind. A rump Yugoslavia taking parts of Bosnia, Croatia, and then keeping Montenegro, and then forcefully reabsorbing Macedonia. So the book describes a witness, a participant in these meetings, who explains how Milosevic took the Greek foreign minister to follow him to a smaller and darker room. In the center of the room was a big table on which lay a map of the Balkans. Look here, Milosevic told Samaras, in the center of Fyrom, Macedonia, and especially in Tetovo and the surrounding areas, live around, a number of Serbs, as reported by the census. And the Greek foreign minister immediately understood what his host had in mind and asked, "Do you mean to say that at one point or another they will face a problem and will have to move to a different location, the Serbs?" The Serb president revealed immediately what he meant. They will move, not only those, but also thousands of other Serb refugees who are living in the north will move to the south, toward Skopje and toward the Greek borders. Then Serbia and Greece will have common borders. Essentially, Milosevic is talking about taking back Macedonia, and maybe with a small, the Greeks were discussing like a narrow, like 20 kilometers wide buffer zone, which Greece would occupy into Macedonia, essentially toward Bitola and toward Doiran and Gevgelia, actually taking these cities, while the rest would belong to Serbia. And Samaras, who in the last episode of our podcast I shared an interview in which he is discussing precisely this partition of Macedonia between Bulgaria and Albania, or between Serbia and Albania. And Samaras at this point told Milosevic that he will raise this issue with President Mitsotakis at the time, and they will think of, and Mitsotakis told Samaras that he will think about this proposal of partitioning Macedonia. It didn't go quite as far, but a very important element in the name issue which Greece raised over Macedonia was precisely this keeping Macedonia unrecognized, keeping Macedonia internationally in a limbo until such a time when Serbia will be able to take us back under its wing.
Wow. That's a good bit of history and remembering what could have been. Obviously, it didn't, and Macedonia, went on to become an independent republic, and of course now faces a bit of a first pick. And
it can still happen, is all I'm saying.
Well, that's a bit dark. Well, I've got something a bit more, a bit lighter, a bit happier, a bit more pleasant. It's a blog I just found. Family on the Road is the name of the family travel blog. It's husband, wife, 2 little girls, and they travel around the region. And this blog, which just came out a few days ago at the end of March for the first time, and beautiful photography. They list Skopje, Ohrid, of course. Let's see what else we got. Mavrovo National Park, Bitola, all the famous places. The stone dolls of Kuklica, always a fascinating one. Leshnovo. What else? Berovo, of course. Lake Doiran. We'll put that on the show notes. It's a fun thing to read. It's good to share with friends that may not know anything about Macedonia. It's a great introduction, and people that are coming to Macedonia for the first time. So a family on the road and 10 places to visit in Macedonia is my farmer's pick.
Come visit it while it's still here.
It will always be there, and it will always be Macedonia. And those of us, Macedonians and friends of Macedonia who love Macedonia, are going to give it our all to make sure that it stays there and it stays Macedonia, always and forever.
Yeah, we have to go dark sometimes. It's a coping mechanism. Otherwise, April's Fool's tomorrow, literally the last 3-4 years were April's Fools, day in, day out.
Yeah, well, it won't always be like this. So anyway, I think that's it for this week. We'll see what happens in the coming week with the presidential election starting. Always good talking to you, Cvetin.
You too. Enjoy the song, guys.
Nešto ke te pitam, babo, pravo da mi kažeš. Nešto ke te pitam, babo, pravo da mi kažeš. Pravo da mi kažeš, babo, bez da me izlažeš. Pravo da mi kažeš, babo, bez da me izlažeš. Vojvodi bea, babo, uvasna večera. Koji vojvodi bea, babo, uvasna večera. Da li god se delčev, babo, ili da me gruer. Da li god se delčev, babo, ili da me gruer. Nešto che te pitam.